There's one experience I've written in Vistas of Infinity where I had a very powerful experience where I saw myself as, the best way to describe it was like a three-dimensional tapestry, not like a physical body at all, but an energy field made up of millions of different aspects. Okay, part of these aspects were different lives, and they all contributed to create this incredibly rich tapestry. And this tapestry of what I got to know of myself was infinitely connected to other tapestries, and the connections were literally infinite. And I was able to dip into different aspects, and whenever I did that, that could have been a past life I dipped into, you know. And the way I did that, when I dipped into a past life, I would experience a past life exactly the way I would experience this life now, in full waking consciousness. It was not like a vision or anything, or sort of like a hypnotic regression where you, in your mind's eye, see a scenery. No, it was an absolute real life, here now experience where I was totally aware of the dual consciousness, the person I was at the time in my past life, as well as the observer me, who was observing my past life. So these two aspects, and also the awareness that I was either in meditation or lying in bed asleep, you know. So these three aspects, and that is a beautiful thing when you reach a certain stage, that you can dip into different aspects. But because it's so infinite, we are such infinite beings, the only way I follow this impulse is when I'm sort of directed, you know, either through an out-of-body experience, that my attention is directed towards this. Because I think my main concern is to live a practical here and now life. I have actually given up on out-of-body experience, sort of interest in out-of-body experience, you know, and they happen very, very rarely, and they usually only happen when there's a need. For example, recently my wife's uncle died, who was also a good friend of mine, because he was a friend of mine who was an artist, painter, and we always, when we met, the rare occasions where we met, we really connected. And about a year before he died, we went to his house, and he gave me his paintings, which was his best piece, really, which was in his lounge. And I made a comment, and he said, have it, you know. So he gave me this painting. So we had quite a good relationship, and then he was about 91 or 92, earlier, last year he died, and we went to his funeral. And earlier this year I had an out-of-body experience where I met him. And it was incredible, because he said, Jürgen, you won't believe what I can do now. You know, I didn't really know how to paint. You know, now every brush stroke is a universe in itself. And he started painting abstract. And I spent a long time sharing his enthusiasm where he was. He had a massive studio, lived in a great house. And so I also met his family, who was there, who visited him while they were asleep and probably had not even had a recall. So then my wife and I went to meet the family, and I said to my wife, do you think I should mention this to them? It's such a positive experience. And she said, oh, I'm not sure, they're Catholics and they don't believe in this sort of thing, you know. So I couldn't help myself when I saw his wife, a really, really nice old lady. She told me then how devastated she was at having lost her. She started crying, you know. So I then told her, don't worry about it, you know, I just met your husband, you know. I then told her about it, and she just took it, and she thanked me, you know. And I told his sons about it. One of them took it seriously, the other one didn't. But I felt I needed to, you know, at that point, and I think that was the whole purpose why I was sort of meeting up with him again. But the thing now for me is that the whole point about living is awareness. It's awareness of where you are at that time, and you can have this awareness on any level of consciousness you happen to be in, whether it's in the highest heaven, if you like, the most paradisical surrounding. You can have the same awareness. You can also have in the deepest or darkest dungeon. You know, this awareness doesn't change. You know, and the way I feel about it, where I am now is a place I absolutely belong to. You know, so there, I feel there's no need for me to be anywhere else, because this awareness is right here where I am. You know, I don't have to do anything, I don't have to go anywhere in order to find it, you know. But I'm open to it. If consciousness sort of directs my attention to something else I need to know, I'm quite willing to sort of explore things like that. The main thing, I think, is our evolution, I feel, only really will start when we become aware of our true identity, of our authentic self, you know, which I think is the awakened state. Because until then, everything is a bit of a smokescreen. You know, we are not guided by our authentic self. We are guided by impulses and ideas and beliefs. And as we all can see in our political situation at the moment on the planet, in America or in England or anywhere, when you look at it, people are blind. They don't actually know what's going on. When you listen to a debate in the House of Commons or something, they don't really have a plan, or they don't really know how to respond. It's all a big facade, you know, and it's basically, we live in a blind situation where there's very little awareness. The key where the awareness actually breaks through to people like Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi, these people become sort of held hostage by their opposition, you know. These people are sort of not allowed really to succeed, only at great cost in the end. And we see that all the time. We live in an environment at the moment which is sort of in the dark, a little bit covered in a smoke screen. And this, once this sort of smoke screen settles, and I would say it's a very, very positive time at the moment we experience. I mean, the mere fact that we gather like this here, you know, that would have been unheard of 20 or 30 years ago. You know, there are people, everybody here in this room already knows there's more to life. You know, there's much more to than what the majority of people still experience. So that is an interesting thing, because that is a thing that gradually catches on, and it spreads in the same way, I would say, as our beliefs have changed in the past when we discovered that the Earth is not flat anymore. You know, that it's round. And at first people were perplexed, they couldn't understand it, how the Earth can be round, but then gradually everybody sort of accepted it. Now we get into a phase where we see that we are not who we think we are, you know, that most of our psychology, and that's the interesting thing, the rise of, I mean, we're only becoming aware since psychology was invented, which is not so long ago. You know, we now become aware that we are basically machines which are running on certain programs, you know, that we haven't really got free will. and psychology is teaching us, that we are basically machines, not really controlled by our true inner self. And all these aspects are part of an awakening process which is taking place. And that has got its own momentum, and gradually will feed into the wider population. And I would say maybe in 20, 30, 50 years, it will be taken for granted because there's no getting away from. Then people will look back and think, how could we have been so blind? How could we have not accepted this earlier or sooner? So it's a gradual process. It's not something that is going to happen suddenly, but it's the more people become aware of this reality, the more it will filter into the wider population. And on the other hand, the more the negative aspects will become visible and stand out. So we have got the dichotomy of these positive revolution taking place and the opposites of being shown up in the light of it. So that's we're an interesting time. So I see it very positive. What's going on? Well, I studied art in Hamburg, so in a way my artwork has always been part of my meditation process. It has always been part of it. It's been through all sorts of different phases. Of course, that was always linked to the state of consciousness I was in. At the moment, because I see I've got a very vivid inner vision. Once you have visited a place like that, that sort of impression never leaves you. When you're seeing sceneries, even now they're so crystal clear. I can see these. I can pick up on these sceneries, and in my mind's eye, I can follow them into totally new environments. So my visualization has been enhanced. When I look back at certain images, I can revisit sceneries, whether it's on the astral level, and I can, simply by thinking about it, discover more about it. And that's another thing about the awakening process which takes place. You transcend the mind. You transcend the mind and the thinking, or the thinking becomes different. You don't think anymore in the traditional sense. A leads to B. Instead, you know. It's like dipping into a knowledge pool, not necessarily factual knowledge, but a wisdom knowledge. That is not a knowledge that is to do with facts. It's an understanding of reality. It's a wisdom level. It's the only way I can describe it, which transcends traditional thinking. So if, for example, you're challenged in some way, you, instead of thinking, how do I deal with it, you know how to deal with it, and you do it through an instant process guided through the heart, and spontaneously manifests itself. And then you think, oh, what did I just do? Or how did I do that? And it's quite an interesting process, because everything is transformed. The traditional methods become redundant, and you say things or do things which, when you think about logically, they may not necessarily make sense, but they turned out to be the right thing you do. So all these things change, and with regard to art, you suddenly find yourself going into new directions, which you may not have considered. I don't think that would apply to me, but when you're a painter, you may suddenly become a dancer or something like that, you know. So it could be that you suddenly become aware of different aspects of yourself which you have neglected because you were programmed in a direction which you thought you were in. But now you discover, because you've freed yourself, oh, there's other things I haven't really explored. Because your identifications, your old identifications and fixations, they're sort of erased. You know, you have to, you suddenly see more potential and you can do other things. Yes, I mean, that's something that came from my fantasy illustrations. They originated in these experiences. I started painting them, and I used watercolor, you know. But although the watercolor gave the impression of the feeling of the light, this was all done very well, but I couldn't really reproduce them the way I experienced them. So when digital computer-generated art became available as a tool, and because I'm a professional illustrator, I used it to try to record or represent the sceneries which I have visited in some way, you know. And because it's already there, I'm using the medium. When I'm using the same software they use in the film industry, so the next stage was that it became more possible to use this technology to become more productive. So before I produced a video about 15 years ago, which was called Samadhi, and it took me 5,500 hours to render, you know, and I worked 18 months on 20 minutes video. I can do that in a day now, you know. So that's has changed, and now suddenly I find, oh, not only can I represent these sceneries, recreate them, but I can actually get people to walk through them. And that was the interest, you know. I now am linked up with a friend of mine, Craig Bruce. I don't know whether you know him. He's a very talented musician. He's done a lot of sounds and music with mantras. If you look him up, Craig Bruce, you will like his music because it comes straight from the inner heart, you know. And so we're working together now to create experiences which have people may find gives them a closer insight into what happens. Yes, I think the most to me it was a feeling of whenever I made a mistake or acted inauthentically. There was when I talked about my silent companion, this awareness would disappear. This awareness of, if you like, a higher self or an authenticity. The moment I did something which was incongruent with reality, or which was negative, or didn't work, I found I was sort of running against the wall, and it didn't sink. Okay, and so I quickly, it's almost like putting your finger in a candle, and you say, oh, that was wrong, you know, don't go there. So it becomes an intuitive feeling first, you know, and it feels wrong very quickly. It's not a logical thing anymore. It's not that, oh, shall I do this, or what happens if I do that, maybe that person will do such and such. So these sort of types of reasoning or rationalization doesn't apply anymore because it doesn't take you anywhere, you know. So, and also you very quickly begin to act from a position of goodwill and love. You know, that becomes an instinctive thing instead of defending a position. You know, you want to, because you are not separated from the other person, you sort of include the other person into your decision. Okay? It's not a you against somebody or them against you. It's just you. You know, so you feel there's a compassionate aspect, because there's nothing else you can do other than include the other person. You know, it's easier said than done, I have to say, you know, because your lower nature, your physical nature, your lower mind, all these things are still a reality. You know, it's just that it's not, you're no longer identified with it. You may still do stupid things, okay? But then there's this aspect, the observer aspect, which notices it and says, hang on a minute, you know, that's not right. And there's this aspect that calls you back and says, oh, you made a bit of a mistake here, you know. And of course, the more you do that, the more sure-handed you become in your decision-making and in your life. So that's a daily meditation process where you weigh up, where your environment teaches you right or wrong. So everything you experience is an act of awareness. Well, personally, for me, not really. Stop laughing. My daughter is laughing. So, no, I mean, for some people it may, you know, I just spoke to Jason, you know, it plays a great part in his life. For other people it may as well. For me personally, it didn't. Because we're all differently constructed. And you know, we have got different metabolism, different personality. I never, ever in my life paid much attention to diet, you know, and that didn't have any effect. I only paid attention to diet when I became too fat. so my wife then made me aware of it, otherwise I wouldn't have noticed. You know. So, yeah. So, I mean, but as you know, as Jason said earlier, you know, he said how much effect it has on his mental state.
Energy.
Yeah, and energy. Yeah, and for some people it does, but to me it's more like, oh look, Jürgen, he likes the old donut again, you know. So I let this aspect get away with it. You know, so, but it's a personal decision. I wouldn't say, you know, you must be do this or must do that. I can't say that because I don't know anything about it.
So knowing what you know now, what kind of advice would you have given your former self, you know, as you were starting to explore this question of who am I as a child or as even merging into an adult?
Yes, I mean, on hindsight, I feel everything I did, I couldn't have done anything else. And I think that probably applies to most of us, or nearly everybody of us, because we are where we are, because of what we are. You know, and the only thing I would say is take notice of your cock-ups, you know, and don't let things don't be controlled by things, you know. Try to, I mean, to me the most important thing was to gain freedom and sovereignty, and that disappears the moment you are controlled by things which take the freedom away from you, which can be drink, or it can be unhealthy relationships or addictions or anything like that, you know. So if you like freedom, then, you know, but some people go through this process because they don't want freedom, you know. But that's right. you can't really do much. You can only do the best you can. And with awareness, the moment, I think awareness is a key thing. To use every moment, every situation to become aware more. And that is a fast way to lead a satisfying life, I think. And
so, if your inner child, that one that asks your mother, "Who am I?"
Yes.
If a similar sort of age was to ask that kind of question to you.
But what would I tell my child? I would say, yeah, good question. You have to find out.
Jürgen, what is the next step in the evolution of your true self after you leave this planet?
Oh. Well, I've got. I probably have some travel plans. Yeah, so I mean, I really, I'm open to all sorts of kinds of experience. I mean, I've visited some places which I would like to sort of reside for a couple of thousand years. But yeah, I mean, it's this part of life. I always found, especially when I returned from one of these experiences, I always find this is just a very, very tip of the iceberg, what we're experiencing here, you know. And so I can't say, I mean, I'm totally open to what I might do, or what is expected, or what I expect of myself. I'm just a newbie here, you know, so I'm open to anything. So I haven't got any plans for the future.
And do you think we live parallel lives on different levels?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, we live multiple lives at the same time. I mean, you just have to look at yourself in the day-to-day business. You may be typing away on your computer, but in your mind you may be walking along a beach in Florida or somewhere, you know. So that actually does happen. We have an astral body, you know, which does things while we are occupied with other things. We have experience on multiple levels all the time. You know, we're just not aware of it. When you have a thought, a part of you is in a thought world, where it gathers its experiences, but we don't perceive it as such here, because we have the physical experience of it. The moment the physical experience, let's say, were gone, you would actually be in the thought world then. Your awareness would be there. But because our awareness is currently focused, it doesn't mean there are other aspects of ourselves not gathering experience on different levels. You know, there can be the emotional level. You know, while somebody is shouting at you, you're doing something else, the emotional body sort of gathers new experiences, you know, which you incorporate. So we are multidimensional entities all the time, you know, while we're walking around. When you take one aspect away, like the physical body, we multidimensional aspects minus the physical body. So we are, let's say, on the astral plane. And then we still have a mental body which thinks and it lives in a mental world, and that was another experience. I mean, I could literally write a lot more about these things, which I haven't really, lots of things which I haven't really explored. I mean, there's things like I experienced, there were people on the astral level who take drugs and actually have mind-expanding experiences. That was something I didn't ever accept before, because I thought it's a world which doesn't need any food, you know. But in fact, the food that is consumed is a form of energy, which has got similar configuration as our food here has for the physical body. So when I came across this aspect, I couldn't believe it, because people say, oh well, on the astral realm you never need any food, but but there are people, or I met a group of people who took a drug in order to take them to another level of consciousness, and that was new experience to me, you know. And there are a lot of things which we believe they are not, they can't be true, or they're not true, or because the consensus of mediums and what's written about it, they don't mention it. But I found a lot of things which are not known, which are not widely written about. You know, there's a lot of the knowledge in current literature we have is translated from mediums. You know, there are some very talented mediums who can contact discarnate entities and communicate their experiences. But I found that unless you experience it physically yourself, it's very difficult and hard to tell a person, oh, things are like so and so with a medium, and they say that doesn't make sense, you know, and then they don't communicate it because it's confusing, you know. And there are a lot of things on the astral level itself which would blow your mind, and you couldn't possibly put it in a context which people would easily understand, you know. And this sort of drug experience was one of the things, but there were other things: how people behave, how they appear, how their appearance changes, and it's incredible. I mean, on the physical level, we change our appearance over time, and also via makeup, but on the astral level there can be instant changes and metamorphoses taking place in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways. And there's very little written about in traditional medium literature, but that could fill a whole book if you wanted to. And these things are really worthwhile exploring if you're an out-of-body traveler, you know. There are so many things which we need to understand, or maybe we should explore, because I hopefully that will happen, you know. So, yeah.
So Jason was talking last night about some new strange creatures that he met. I was wondering if you had any stories about, because you talk a lot about meeting other humans and humans that have died, but have you ever met anything really weird?
Yes. Yes, I've met some really strange entities. I mean, as I mentioned, aliens. I've never been a great believer in the alien phenomena, you know, but they are all there. Experiences of people morphing, or entities morphing into other entities. There were even whole shows where people, a bit like a carnival procession here. That's the closest I can imagine. But there are festivals I visited where people turn up in all sorts of interesting and weird disguises, having a whale of a time, you know. Then, of course, there are the, I think this is probably what Jason may refer to, there are the artificial entities, and there are the energies which we create out of our fears and anxieties. You know, there's a whole monster world that exists on the lower levels, which is quite gruesome, and they are often created by negative energies and fears. But you don't come into contact with it if you are sort of purified. You know, if you can come into contact with them, but they don't necessarily have any effect on you, or they're not aware that you are there, you know. For example, I have been on very dark, sort of sinister levels, really quite grim, you know, almost not, can't bring myself to talk about how deeply despicable these levels are, but I hadn't lost my awareness of my authentic self, so I wasn't I wasn't affected by what I saw. It was just a visual sort of experience, and the entities living in these realms, they don't have any awareness of you, that you're there, you know. Or if you do become visible to them, they have no power over you, you know. Very often, I described some instances in my book, Vistas of Infinity, that your appearance to some people on the lower levels can be anything from just a light, you know, a sphere of light, or you may appear to them like an angel, let's say, you know, although you're a normal human being, you know. I had one experience where I had an out-of-body experience where I went visited a medium who had a session with one of her clients. Okay, I don't know how I got there, but I suddenly found myself in a seance session, and the medium clearly saw me. He said, "Oh, are you my guide?" I said, "No, I'm just pure chance." and then I saw her client sitting there, and she said to me mentally, she said, "I can't get through this guy. Can you tell me a bit about him?" And I saw him like a block, sort of, you just couldn't get into, you know. And I said,
sorry, was this the client?
Yeah, her client. And the medium asked me, "Can you tell me something about him?" You know. And I said, what do you want me to ask him? What his favorite color is, or something? I couldn't see into him. He was just sort of shielded off, you know. And then she asked again, "Am I your guide?" You know, and I said to her, "No, if anybody, you are a guide," you know, because she had an incredibly bright appearance, a very luminous aura, you know, a very powerful person. I think I was probably drawn to her because she had this sort of beacon appearance, you know. So I felt, so these things sort of can happen. You know.
Have your past lives always been as a human on Earth, and also has there been a consistency with your journey, or have you had different sort of personalities, characters?
Yes. I had some experiences of past life I'm not really very proud of, you know, and some negative experience where it turned out I was a real scumbag, you know. And I wrote in Multidimensional Man about such an existence, and also it was quite horrible to experience that I spent a whole life living out a negative existence, and what I learned. And I found out later, after I had this experience, that there were still remnants which I recognized even in this life, you know, and I couldn't quite figure out where they came from. And I then found the reason I've been shown this past life to understand where they came from. But equally, I've also had very sort of quite honorable lives, I would say, experience, you know, some positive lives. But we have so many sides to ourselves, you know, that the last thing I could say of myself is I'm some sort of highly evolved person, because there are so many shadow sides to us. You know, the only thing that distinguishes me from other people is that I have had an awareness of these things. But everybody has the same sort of aspects to themselves, and they all become visible when you expand your awareness. You know, you can dip into them, you can see the deficiencies, you can see where you have some more work to do, you know, and you can clearly, sometimes you can clearly see, okay, this aspect of me requires a lifetime in itself to deal with it, you know. So there's all, at a certain stage, these things can be laid open like an open book, you know, and that's the idea of between incarnations. When you get the higher viewpoint, you can see the wholeness of you, and you will pick the type of life that addresses these shortcomings.
Like, you said something about the places you would like to reside in. Could you just, for the fun or the joy of it, describe such a place to us?
Yes. In one experience, my mother, who died in 1996, I met her quite frequently after she died, and she once took me to a place where she insisted that Julia, my wife, and I sort of frequently go there, which will be our place. It was a rather beautiful place with an amazing garden, and I know my wife likes flowers and gardens, so I could imagine myself there. And then in Vistas of Infinity I've written various houses I designed on the astral plane, places I designed with a big studio, and then when I come back months later, there are squatters in it. And they've taken over and used it for other purposes. And one earlier this year I had an experience of a house which I've been building and renovating over several sort of out-of-body experience, and I could see it taking shape. And then when I come back, oh yes, I neglected this. Okay, so I go through the rooms and it's progressing and everything, And then finally it's all done, then the last time I came back to it was in March, 3 months later, it was squatters in it again. Yeah. Yes. And the funny thing was they were all artists. So I had a guided tour by one of the people who sort of smirked all the time because he recognized that it was my house, and he introduced me to all these artists, and they were sort of showing their gratitude to me. And it was quite funny because you can't, of course, maintain places, but when they are, we're building things up, very often in our dream without actually being aware of it. We're using our energies to create spaces for ourselves, But of course there are other places, which I would say, each place, I try to describe it, there are so many different reality levels, and they are aligned to the type of energy we manifest. So if we have very positive energies, we are gravitating to much higher levels where there's more creative energy at play. So we can do really incredible constructions and things, and create places which are literally dream places, So we're not limited in any sense. We're only limited by our imagination. And on even higher levels, where we get into the pure energy levels, things happen so instantly, and quickly. It appears that almost everything is already in existence, so we just need to focus our attention. And then we can shift our attention, and suddenly we can enter a totally different universe, different world, so we can travel at a moment's notice from one dimension to another, and suddenly have a completely different world. And the worlds, the best way to describe it is, if you take, for example, a color, let's say a bluish color, or I've visited worlds which I could describe, they're silver worlds. They're made out of silver. But there are millions of shades of silver. So many shades of silver as we have colors in our real world, Then you shift your attention and you move into another dimension, and suddenly there are pinks. But millions and millions of different pinks. So what I'm saying is a different atmosphere, a totally different atmosphere. And of course, there are millions and millions of places. So you can spend an eternity just living in one of these amazing, beautiful worlds for an eternity, and then maybe move on. There's literally no end to it. you know. And these become accessible the moment we liberate ourselves from our fixations, you know, and become our true consciousness. Then suddenly the whole universe opens up to us. And that's an incredible journey, you know, before us.